Welcome back to Fiction Flux. Today we're starting a brand new fanfic. What if Female Deku became the strongest villain in the universe? Let's jump right into it. There is a moment in every person's life where the universe sends them a message. Sometimes that message is gentle, a soft nudge, a kind word from a stranger, a lucky break that makes you think, okay, maybe things are going to be all right. And sometimes the universe looks you dead in the eyes, laughs directly in your face and says, nope. For Izumi Midorya, the universe had been laughing for a very, very long time. She was 4 years old, the first time she understood what she was. Not a hero, not a villain, not anything exciting or dangerous or worth remembering. She was quirkless. The doctor had shown her mother the X-ray with the gentleness of a man who knew he was about to ruin 2 lives at once. The joint, the toe joint, the stupid, tiny, insignificant toe joint that told the entire world whether you were born with power or born without it. Izumi's joint was the wrong kind. She remembered staring at that X-ray like it was personally attacking her, like those bones had made a decision without consulting her. Rude, she thought, even at 4 years old. That is genuinely so rude of my own skeleton. Her mother cried on the drive home. Izumi pressed her forehead against the cold car window and watched the city blur past. Every billboard had a hero on it, every poster, every screen in every store they drove by. Smiling, powerful, perfect people with perfect quirks who had never once looked at an X-ray and felt their entire future collapse in real time. She didn't cry, not then. She saved those tears for later, tucked them somewhere deep in her chest like a little collection, adding to them day after day until that collection became something else entirely. Something heavier, something that didn't feel like sadness anymore. But that comes later. Right now she was just a 4-year-old girl with the wrong toe joint, riding home in a quiet car, watching heroes fly overhead and thinking, I could still do it. I can still be a hero. She had absolutely no idea how wrong she was. And honestly, neither did the universe. Because what the universe had not yet realized, what every doctor and teacher and childhood bully and symbol of peace would eventually learn the hard way, was that Izumi Midorya's quirklessness was not a limitation. It was a countdown. Chapter 2, Kaken and the Art of Ruining Someone's Entire Personality. Let's talk about Katsuki Bakugo. Or as Izumi called him for the first 10 years of her life, Kaken. And before you ask, yes, the guy who would one day make it his personal mission to destroy every last shred of her self-worth was the same guy she called Kaken with a warm smile and stars in her eyes for an embarrassingly long time. This is important. Remember this, the fact that she loved him first, fiercely and completely, and without any reason other than that she was a child and he was her best friend, is the thing that makes everything that comes after so much worse. They had been inseparable at 5, the kind of inseparable that only happens in childhood, where you just decide someone is your person, and that is that, no application process required, no background check, no red flags assessed. Kaken was loud and angry even back then, the kind of kid who exploded things just to watch them burn, and Izumi had followed him like a tiny green shadow, completely convinced that this was normal best friend behavior. She made notebooks about him, hero analysis notebooks, filled cover to cover with observations about his quirk, his fighting style, the way his explosions smelled faintly of caramel when they were small and burning rubber when they got bigger. She analyzed the sweat glands in his palms like she was writing a research paper. She was 6. He thought it was weird, she thought it was dedicated, they were both right. When his quirk emerged, everything changed. Not slowly, not gradually, not in the careful, manageable way that life changes when it is being kind to you. All at once, like a door slamming shut. One day he was Kaken, her loud, annoying best friend who she would follow anywhere. The next day he was Bakugo, the most powerful kid in the neighborhood, and the neighborhood had decided to worship him for it. Teachers praised him, parents praised him. Other kids orbited him like he was a small, aggressive, explosion-powered son. And Izumi. Izumi was quirkless, which meant Izumi was nothing. She remembered the exact first time he called her Deku. She remembered it the way you remember the moment you break a bone. Not the pain exactly, not at first, just the sound. That horrible crack of something that had been solid suddenly becoming wrong. He said it laughing. That was the part that stayed with her. He wasn't even trying to hurt her specifically, not that first time. He was just performing for the crowd of kids around him, using her as the punchline of a joke she hadn't been invited to. And the word just came out Deku like it was nothing, like she was nothing, and everyone laughed, and he laughed, and Izumi stood there in the middle of all that laughing, and felt something very quiet and very cold slide into the place where warmth used to be. She went home and looked up what Deku meant. Useless, unable to do anything. She cried then, those saved-up tears finally found their moment. And she made a decision, standing in her bathroom with a face full of tears and snot, 8 years old and already exhausted in a way that no 8-year-old should ever be. She was going to prove them all wrong. She was going to become a hero, the best hero. The kind of hero who shows up on every billboard and every poster and every screen in every store, and people would point and say that is Deku. She was quirkless, and she made it anyway, and Kaken would see it and feel absolutely terrible about himself. This was, in retrospect, a completely reasonable and understandable plan. It was also a plan that the universe was already preparing to destroy. Chapter 3, All Might and the 15 seconds that ended everything. By the time she was 14, Izumi had notebooks. Not one, not two, not a sensible, manageable number of notebooks. She had 47 hero analysis notebooks. She had catalogued every pro hero in Japan with a level of detail that would have made professional analysts nervous. She knew weaknesses that the heroes themselves hadn't noticed. She knew optimal quirk combinations for team battles before the heroes using those quirks had ever tried them. She knew how to compensate for a quirkless body in a fight through strategy and positioning, and sheer stubbornness, so comprehensive it had basically become a quirk in its own right. She was, by every measure except the official one, already more qualified to be a hero than most of the people actually doing it. The official measure, unfortunately, cared about exactly one thing. Quirk or no quirk. She didn't let it stop her. She couldn't. Being a hero wasn't a career choice for Izumi. It was the only thing standing between her and the question of what she actually was if she wasn't a hero. She couldn't afford to look at that question directly. It was too big and too dark, and she had been avoiding it for 10 years with notebooks and analysis and the quiet, desperate certainty that it would all work out somehow. Then she met All Might. She had been watching him deal with a villain. An actual live villain, the slime kind, the gross suffocating kind, and she had been so absolutely overwhelmed by the fact that her hero was right there in front of her that she had grabbed his leg as he launched himself skyward. This was not a smart decision. She would be the first to admit that. She had dangled off All Might's legs several hundred feet above the ground and held on through sheer terror and determination, while he told her very kindly, but very firmly to let go before she died. When they landed, she had one question. One question she had been carrying for 10 years like a stone in her chest. Can someone without a quirk become a hero? She said it like a prayer. She said it like a confession. She said it with every ounce of desperate, exhausted, decade-long hope that she had been saving specifically for this moment, for this man, for the answer that was going to make everything make sense. All Might looked at her for a long moment. And then he said no. He said it gently, he said it kindly, he said it with all the care of a man who understood he was delivering devastating news and wanted to soften the blow. He talked about the dangers. He talked about professionalism. He talked about becoming a police officer instead, a support course student, something adjacent, something safer, something that wasn't the one thing she had built her entire identity around for the last decade. He said it like it was advice. It landed like a verdict. Izumi stood there on the rooftop while All Might walked away, and she did not cry. She had run completely out of tears somewhere around age 11, around the 40th time Bakugo burned her notebooks, and what was left in the place where tears used to be was something quieter and much more dangerous. She looked out over the city. Every billboard, every poster, every screen. Heroes everywhere, all of them powerful, all of them quirked, all of them belonging to a world that had just officially, through the voice of its most beloved symbol, told her she did not belong. She thought about 10 years of notebooks, 10 years of running, 10 years of training in every way she could think of without a quirk to train, 10 years of believing that the right attitude and the right effort and the right amount of determination could overcome the fundamental fact of her biology. And she thought about how the world was going to look if she let go of this, if she accepted it, if she went home and told her mother and enrolled in support courses and spent the rest of her life adjacent to heroism, close enough to touch but never allowed to be it. She thought about all of that. And something in her chest, something she had been holding together with hope and willpower and 47 notebooks for a very long time, quietly and completely broke. She didn't notice, not right away. She just walked home. But the thing that broke stayed broken. And the cold thing that had slid in 8 years ago when Bakugo first called her Deku began, slowly and silently, to fill the space where that broken thing used to be. Chapter 4, The Slime Villain and the Worst Afternoon in History. Here is something that nobody talks about enough. Izumi saved Bakugo. She didn't plan it, she didn't decide it. She saw him getting suffocated by the slime villain, and the sight of his terrified face, Bakugo Katsuki, who had never looked terrified a day in his life, Kaken, who had been fearless and furious since birth, cracked something open in her chest that she thought had already finished cracking. She moved before she thought. She threw her bag, she pulled at the slime. She did everything a quirkless girl with no combat training and absolutely no tactical advantage could do, which is to say she mostly just made herself a very committed obstacle. The heroes arrived, All Might arrived, Bakugo was saved. And then the heroes yelled at her. She stood there with slime on her hands and adrenaline in her blood, and the very recent memory of having just decided, on a rooftop 15 minutes ago, that she wasn't allowed to be a hero, and the heroes she admired told her that she had been reckless and dangerous, and that she should have left it to the professionals. She nodded, she apologized, she said she understood. She walked away. And then Bakugo grabbed her. She should have kept walking. That would have been the smart thing to do. But she stopped because this was Kaken, because there was a part of her that was still 8 years old and still hopping, still collecting those saved-up tears, still waiting for the moment when he looked at her like she was a person. He grabbed her and he got very close to her face, and he told her that he hadn't needed saving, that she had humiliated him, that she should never, ever do something like that again. And he said, don't think that because you did something reckless that it means you can be a hero. You can't, you're quirkless, you're Deku, you'll always be Deku. Then he walked away. All Might watched it happen. All Might, the man who had just told her she couldn't be a hero, who had then rescued the boy who had spent 6 years destroying her, watched it happen and did not say a single word. Izumi stood alone in the middle of the street. The cold thing in her chest spread another inch. She looked up at the sky. Big open blue sky, the kind of sky that in every hero story means something hopeful is coming, something important, the hero's journey about to begin. She stared at it for a very long time. And then, very quietly, she made a new decision. Not about being a hero anymore. About something else entirely. She just didn't know what yet. Chapter 5, The Bridge. She went to the bridge because it was where she went when she needed to think. The bridge over the river near her house, the one she had run across 1,000 times in training, the one where she used to stop and watch the water and imagine herself in costume saving people, back when imagining herself saving people was still something she was allowed to do. She sat on the railing with her legs dangling. It was getting dark, the city lit up below her, all of it, the whole gorgeous, impossible city full of heroes and billboards and people who had quirks and futures, and a place in a world that made sense to them. She thought about the doctor and the X-ray and her mother crying in the car. She thought about Kaken exploding her notebooks and laughing while he did it. She thought about All Might's face, gentle and final, saying no. She thought about being Deku, always being Deku, no matter how hard she trained, no matter how many notebooks she filled, no matter how desperately she wanted it, always Deku, always useless, always nothing. She sat on that railing for a long time. And the universe, for once, was quiet. No billboards, no heroes, just the sound of the water below and the distant hum of a city that had never once made room for her. This was the moment, the exact moment, the one that everything before it had been building toward and everything after it would be shaped by. She closed her eyes. She thought about the cold thing in her chest, how long it had been growing, how it had started as something small, a splinter of something, the day a boy she loved called her worthless and laughed about it, how it had grown with every burned notebook, every doctor's visit, every polite and devastating no, how it had been waiting, patient as stone, for exactly this moment. She opened her eyes. And down below, in the shadow under the bridge, something was watching her. She almost didn't see it. It was dark, almost perfectly dark, just a density in the shadow that was slightly wrong, slightly too still, slightly too intentional to be a trick of the light. But Izumi had 47 notebooks about noticing things other people missed. She looked at the shadow for a long time. And then, because she had nothing left to lose, and that is a terrifying amount of freedom, she said, "I can see you." The shadow moved, and a voice came out of it, low and dry and ancient in a way that had nothing to do with age, the voice of something that had been waiting a very, very long time, and it said, "I know, I've been watching you for a while, you're interesting." Izumi should have run. She did not run. She said, "Why?" And the shadow said, "Because the world broke you today and you didn't break back. You just sat here. That means you're either very strong or very tired." Izumi thought about it. "Both," she said. "What are you?" A pause. Something that was told it couldn't be what it wanted to be, the voice said, a long time ago, by people who thought they knew better. The cold thing in her chest moved. Not outward this time, inward, deeper, like recognition. Who are you? She asked. And the shadow stepped out from under the bridge, and Izumi looked at what had been watching her, and her 47 notebooks of hero analysis did something they had never done before. They became completely, utterly useless. Because what was standing in front of her was not a hero. And it was not looking at her like she was nothing. It was looking at her like she was exactly what it had been searching for. Chapter 6, All for One and the job offer nobody expected. He was not what she expected. She had read about All for One in hushed tones and broken sentences, the way people talked about things too dangerous to say out loud, the boogeyman of hero society. The villain who had broken All Might, had broken the world, had been sealed away and presumably destroyed, and had apparently decided that none of that was particularly permanent. He did not look like a boogeyman. He looked like a man wearing a mask over a ruin, which she supposed was exactly what he was, and he sat across from her on the bridge railing with the casual ease of someone who had never once been told they were nothing and would never have believed it if they had been. He looked at her for a long time. She stared back because she was Izumi Midorya, and staring at things that scared her had never once stopped her from also analyzing them. He had no eyes that she could see, the mask, the darkness, but she felt seen in a way that made her skin prickle, the way you feel seen when someone looks past the face you show the world and finds the thing underneath you've been trying to keep hidden. You analyzed me just now, he said. I could tell. I analyze everything, she said. It's a habit. No, he said, it's a quirk. She opened her mouth. He held up one hand. Not a registered quirk, not the kind your doctor could find in an X-ray, but the human mind is not separate from the body, Izumi Midorya, no matter what hero society would have you believe. The thing you do, the pattern recognition, the strategic analysis, the way you see 5 moves ahead in any situation without thinking about it, that is not nothing. That is the most dangerous thing in the world. She stared at him. It's just intelligence, she said. He smiled. She could hear it in his voice even through the mask. Yes, he said, exactly. A long pause. The city hummed around them. Somewhere in the distance, a hero was doing something heroic, probably the kind of thing that would end up on a billboard. The kind of thing Izumi had spent her whole life preparing to do, and had just today been officially informed she was not allowed to do. Why are you here? She asked, specifically with me tonight. Because, he said, and his voice had the weight of someone choosing words very carefully, I have been building something for a very long time. And the one thing it has always been missing is someone who can look at hero society not as an enemy to destroy, but as a system to dismantle. Someone who knows that system better than the people running it. He tilted his head. Someone who was trained by that system's own faith in itself, who memorized every hero's weakness because she loved them, who knows every gap in every defense because she was studying to fill those gaps from the inside. Izumi said nothing. You are not useless, he said. You are the most useful person in the world. The heroes built you into a weapon and then threw you away, and they have no idea what they just let go. The cold thing in her chest did something it had never done before. It got warm. Not the good kind of warm, not the warm of being safe or loved or seen kindly. The warm of something that has been frozen for a very long time beginning finally to thaw, which sounds gentle, which is not gentle, which is the kind of warmth that when it finally comes, tends to set things on fire. What are you offering me? She asked. Everything they told you couldn't have, he said. Power, purpose, and the chance to make every single person who ever called you Deku understand exactly what that name means. She thought about the rooftop. She thought about Bakugo's face, inches from hers, telling her she would always be nothing. She thought about 47 notebooks, burned and replaced and burned again, and the fact that she had replaced every single one because she refused to stop, refused to quit, refused to accept the world's verdict on who she was. She thought about what she was willing to do with that refusal now, that heroism was no longer an option. She looked at All for One. I have conditions, she said. He laughed. It was a real laugh, she thought, surprised and delighted, and not at all what she expected from the most dangerous villain in the history of Japan. Of course you do, he said. First, she said, I'm not doing this for you. I'm not your weapon. I'm not your tool. The moment I figure out I'm being used, I walk. Acceptable, he said. Second, she said, I keep my notebooks. Everything I learn, I write down. That's mine. Also acceptable. Third, she said, I want to understand everything, not just what you tell me, everything, the whole system. Heroes, villains, quirks, the structure of it all. I want to know how it actually works, not the version they put on billboards. He was quiet for a moment. That, he said, is the first condition anyone has ever given me that I actually respect. Izumi Midorya nodded. She looked out at the city one more time. The billboards, the heroes, the world that had built itself entirely around the assumption that she would never matter. All right, she said. She got off the railing. She picked up her bag. And Izumi Midorya, the girl who was supposed to be nothing, who was supposed to be Deku, who was supposed to accept the verdict quietly and find something adjacent to the life she wanted and be grateful for it, walked away from the bridge and into the dark. Behind her, the city blazed with heroes. Ahead of her, something else entirely. And in notebook number 48, which she would begin that very night, she wrote on the very first page in her neat, careful handwriting. Notes on the Destruction of Hero Society, Volume 1. And below that, because she was still Izumi Midorya, and she had never been able to resist this particular habit. Threat level maximum, asset me. Izumi stepped into the night with notebook number 48 under her arm, feeling the city hum around her like a living organism she had finally stopped fearing. Every billboard, every screen, every passerby who walked unaware of the chaos building above their heads became part of the calculus she had been running in her mind for years. She was no longer just a girl who had been told she was nothing. She was something the world had failed to measure, and that mistake was about to become its undoing. The shadows of the alleys welcomed her like old friends, silent and watchful, and she moved with a precision that belied her youth. Every step was calculated, every breath measured. She observed the patterns of the city the way she had once catalogued heroes in her notebooks. Only now she catalogued weaknesses, gaps, vulnerabilities, and the invisible threads that kept society standing. All for One had not promised her power. He had promised her knowledge, opportunity, and the chance to turn the rules that had broken her into tools of her own design, and she intended to use every one of them. She paused atop a high rooftop and looked down at a group of rookie heroes patrolling the streets. They were clumsy, fumbling through their patrols, unaware that she could anticipate every move they made before their instincts even kicked in. A small smile played across her lips. She could feel the thrill of strategy coursing through her veins. This was the moment she had been training for without knowing it. The first notebook wasn't just notes, it was a manifesto, a blueprint for dismantling a system that had discarded her. She wrote each line with care, her handwriting precise, her mind racing ahead. How could heroes be so blind to their own weaknesses? How could society be so obsessed with ideals that it ignored the very people who could challenge them? Each observation was a weapon, each calculation a step closer to reshaping the world. A sound behind her made her turn, and she caught the brief flicker of movement in the alley below. Another rookie, probably no more than a year out of UA, trying to prove themselves. Their footfalls were sloppy, their awareness fragmented. She studied them as she would a villain in a simulation, noting the patterns, the predictable panic, the moments where a single misstep could lead to total collapse. Izumi didn't move, she didn't need to. Observation alone was enough. She had waited years for a moment like this, a moment where her intellect, her patience, and her ability to see what others could not would give her the advantage. The city continued to pulse with life below her, unaware of the storm gathering above. The heroes were everywhere, chasing shadows, saving people, applauded for their bravery, but blind to the true danger that had been quietly rising in their midst. She opened notebook 48 again and wrote, Phase 1 assessment complete, patterns recognized, weaknesses mapped, advantage established, initiate sequence. Her eyes lifted to the night sky, where stars shone faintly above the city she had once dreamed of protecting. Dreams were for those who believed in fairness. She had learned that fairness was a lie. Power, precision, and patience were the truths. A faint whisper carried by the wind reached her ears. They won't see you coming. She smiled, quietly, almost reverently. They had already begun, the first moves in a game they couldn't even comprehend. And for the first time in her life, Izumi Midorya felt the weight of being truly untouchable. She closed the notebook, slung it over her shoulder, and began walking down the rooftop toward the shadows, toward the first targets, toward the world that had told her she was nothing. The girl who had once been Deku was gone. What remained was something sharper, colder, and infinitely more dangerous. The city would soon learn her name, and it would tremble. The streets below were alive with sound, but she moved like silence itself had wrapped around her. Every light, every corner, every movement was a variable she catalogued instantly, mentally marking escape routes, blind spots, and reaction times. She was no longer playing the game by the rules of heroes, she was rewriting them entirely. A patrol of mid-tier heroes turned a corner, their faces eager with the thrill of protecting civilians. Izumi watched them, her fingers brushing the edges of her notebook as if drawing the very lines of their fate. One misstep, one split-second hesitation, and she could dismantle their formation without leaving a trace. But she did not strike yet. Patience had always been her weapon, far sharper than any quirk she lacked. Years of careful observation had taught her the value of timing. Each move she made would be deliberate, surgical, inevitable. The first strike would not just defeat, it would announce her existence. From the shadows she whispered to herself, a mantra as precise and cold as steel. Observation, patience, control. She remembered the boy who had laughed at her, the symbol of peace who had turned her away, the notebooks burned and replaced again. Every slight, every dismissal, every moment of being told she was nothing had forged this plan. Her eyes fell on a streetlight flickering above a group of unaware civilians. She noted their positions, the flow of foot traffic, and how the heroes were distracted, focused on an entirely different threat. This was the moment. Small, precise, calculated. A single action here could create chaos, a ripple that would spread and pull every player into her game. She crouched, heart steady, mind sharper than ever. Every second was a calculation, every breath a decision. The world had built itself on ideals she had been denied, and now she would test those ideals. Izumi drew a line across her notebook, underlined it twice, and wrote, Phase 2 Demonstration. Begin subtle disruption. Test responses. Confirm patterns. Her voice, almost lost in the night, murmured to herself, The world made me Deku, told me I was useless. Now it will learn what it overlooked. And then she stepped forward out of the shadows, moving with the certainty of someone who had seen 1,000 possible outcomes and knew which path would fracture everything in her favor. The first domino of hero society was about to fall, and the girl who had been nothing would become the force that no one, not hero, not villain, not symbol, could ignore. The night held its breath, so did she. The first hero didn't even see her coming. Izumi had studied their routines, their quirks, the way they reacted under pressure. Each move, each stance, each blink of hesitation had been catalogued, analyzed, and folded into the strategy she had carried in her mind for years. Her body moved almost without thought, guided by the precision of observation and calculation alone. A flash of light, a brief misdirection, and the hero stumbled, not severely, not permanently, but enough to show the ripple she could create. Izumi stepped back into the shadows, silent, invisible, watching as confusion spread among the group. The panic was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there. She had cracked the first layer. She pulled her notebook from under her coat and scribbled rapidly. Response time slower than expected, confidence shaken, pattern confirmed. Her lips curved into a faint smile. This was only the beginning. Heroes had relied on the rules, on training, on ideals, and all of them had left cracks she could exploit. She didn't need power, she didn't need quirk. She had something far more dangerous: knowledge, patience, and the willingness to use both ruthlessly. From across the street, a child tripped over a stray cable, drawing the attention of another group of heroes. Izumi noted their reaction, noting the delay, the micro-expressions, the instinctive overcorrections. Every interaction, every miscalculation was a seed she planted. Chaos didn't come from brute force. It came from understanding the system better than anyone else. She moved again, silent as the wind, weaving between shadows. The city was her chessboard, and every hero, every patrol, every surveillance drone was a piece to be manipulated. She didn't strike for destruction yet, not this early, but each move she made was a lesson, each observation another step toward mastery. Her mind drifted briefly to Bakugo, to All Might, to every adult who had ever told her she was nothing. The memory fueled her, sharpened her. Every slight, every denial, every moment of humiliation was a tool she wielded now. They had built her into a weapon and discarded her. Fine, she would prove them right. They had created a force they could not control. Izumi stopped on a rooftop. The city stretched below her like a living map. Lights flickered, cars moved, sirens echoed faintly. Heroes shouted in coordination, all of it part of the intricate, fragile system she had studied. And all of it would bend to her understanding, eventually. She opened her notebook and wrote in bold letters across the page. Phase 3 Escalation. Observe, exploit, overwhelm, begin. The shadows seemed to lean closer, the night itself acknowledging her presence. Izumi Midorya, the girl who had been nothing, the girl they called Deku, the quirkless, was no longer waiting. She was moving, calculating, and preparing for a world that would tremble under her hands. And somewhere, far above in the skyline, the heroes had no idea what was coming. The city slept unaware, but Izumi did not. Every street, every alley, every rooftop was a potential stage for the first demonstrations of what she had become. She moved like a whisper through the night, her mind a map of vulnerabilities, weak points, and unseen consequences. Each heartbeat measured, each step deliberate. She watched a group of heroes responding to a petty robbery, their coordination sloppy, their communication fractured. It was the kind of situation she had analyzed hundreds of times in her notebooks, only now she could act instead of observing. She stayed just out of sight, noting timing, positions, and the instinctive errors that every hero inevitably made when pressured. Then she intervened, not with brute force, not with a quirk she did not have, but with precision. A small misdirection, a carefully thrown object, and a momentary confusion spread through the heroes. Panic rippled subtly, enough to make them hesitate, to make them question their reactions, and enough to prove her point. She had cracked the first layer of the system. Izumi stepped back into shadow, watching silently. She allowed herself a small, cold smile. Observation alone had been enough to create fear, disarray, a glimpse of the chaos she could unleash. Power was irrelevant. Knowledge, timing, and control were far deadlier. Her thoughts flickered briefly to All For One, to the mentor who had given her guidance without ever promising obedience. The conditions she had set were simple but binding. She learned, she understood, and she never became a tool. Tonight was the first test of that promise, and she had already begun rewriting the rules. She climbed to a higher rooftop, the city sprawling endlessly below. The lights, the heroes, the chaos, every pattern now fell into place. Her notebook lay open on her lap as she jotted notes. Response patterns predictable, confidence faltering, initiate next sequence, control environment, exploit variables, expand influence. The wind carried her words softly, like a whisper over the sleeping city. Every thought was precise, calculated, deliberate. Izumi Midorya, the girl who had been told she was nothing, had become a force that no hero, no law, no ideal could anticipate. And as the night deepened, a single thought anchored her resolve. The world had made a mistake in underestimating her. That mistake was about to become its undoing. Izumi moved through the city like a shadow that no one noticed until it was too late. Every street corner, every rooftop, every patrol route she had studied in her notebooks became part of a game only she understood. The heroes were unaware, their confidence built on years of routine and trust in their own training. She was about to show them just how fragile that illusion was. She paused for a moment atop a skyscraper, looking down at the city lights shimmering like stars mirrored on the ground. Her notebooks lay open beside her, filled with observations, calculations, and plans. This was the beginning of something bigger, the first steps of a girl who had been told she was nothing, now poised to become a name that would be feared across every dimension. Izumi took a deep breath, feeling the weight of every rejection, every humiliation, every burned notebook she had endured. It had led her to this night, this moment where she could finally turn the world's ignorance into her advantage. Her eyes glinted with determination. She was ready, the game had begun. And with that, she vanished into the shadows once more, the city unaware of the storm that had quietly taken root. That's it for today's part of the story. Comment below if you want us to make part 2, and don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this video. It really helps me a lot and keeps the story going. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for what happens next.